My first piece, I don't know if I have time to read them both, but my first piece I wrote for today, it's like Hillary said, I grew up in Germany, in Bierstadt, Wiesbaden, Hessen, and a couple of other places. Um, and my piece is called Kleines, braunes, deutsches Mädchen, and it means a little brown black girl. The 1950 census identified me as colored, and I graduated to Negro mid-1960s. Circumstances and politics anointed me black in the early 1970s, and today I proudly denote myself as other. I was a little brown-skinned girl growing up in Germany during the early 1960s, unaware that the color of my skin was a factor of my identity. Living above a remote Gasthaus on Bierstadter Straße was easy. There were no other brown-skinned families in the community, and being brown meant that the townspeople assumed that we were related to the likes of Joe Louis or some other famous brown athlete. Being the middle daughter of a military family made day-to-day life pretty predictable. Morning chores were dispersed based on age and the shade of your skin, which meant for me that cleaning the lower regions of our small apartment fell on my hands. Joni, being the lightest among us, performed the chores which my mother, also a light-skinned girl, deemed most difficult for the youngest. However, brushing mommy's hair just didn't feel like a chore to me. Barbara, being the eldest, was able to leave a portion of her task assigned to me by using a threat and a hug, which felt much more like a chokehold now that I recall. Being the middle child was a life sentence. I just knew somehow that I needed to find some place where I felt kindness would find me. By the time I reached 7 years old, I began to understand the benefits of my brownness. While on summer break and often during the busy lunch hour, Frau Scheffler would come knock on my mother's door and ask if I could come downstairs and play with her daughter Lena, who was my age and became my first best friend. What my mother didn't know is that Frau Scheffler would bring me into the restaurant and place me square and center on the bar, while the patrons would approach me one at a time and touch my skin. Some of them would rub my arms and legs as though they were summoning a genie from a bottle. I didn't mind, though. Frau Scheffler fed me well. She rewarded my appearances with chocolate and Gummischlange. She poured Spezi into my glass until it overflowed, and it was here that I found acceptance. I had my fill of bratwurst and sauerkraut. I sang Shirley Temple songs and learned the German language fluently, which allowed me to be of service to my mother's friends, who found themselves in need of an interpreter that they could trust when they ventured out into the economy, also known as German market. The attention grew, as did the resentment brewing in the minds of my sisters. It was with great confusion that my public life and my private life were disconnected. As a child, I imagined that my popularity would bring them joy. Thus is the predictable downfall of the middle child. On the surface of the bar countertop, I felt revered and cherished, and upstairs I was, as I had been, ignored and subjected to the pains of the pecking order and the shade of my skin. The torment would continue into my teens, and the resentments of childhood created a bridge between my sisters and I that crack and tear regularly in our lifetime. 1964. My mother became pregnant with her fourth child and decided that she wanted to return to her family in South Carolina for the birth. My father, most inclined to do as she wished, and I suppose now secretly looking forward to a short-term separation from 3 girls and a grown woman, made the arrangements for our departure. I was 8 years old. I was about to find out what it felt like to be called out, to be ridiculed for who I believed I was, to be called nigger for the first time in my life and not know, except by the tone in which it was delivered, that was something I didn't want to be. For nearly 4 weeks, I refused to speak English while waiting to return to home, to Germany. My grandmother scolded me and called me odd. My sisters appeared to be damn near celebratory in my predicament, and getting my ass whooped for failing to comply was something temporary. When the punishment produced a squealing stop in a language that I knew, those who heard it would totally understand. Until that trip to the South, I hadn't identified myself outside the walls of my family unit. Until that trip down south, I didn't know that I was anything other than somebody's child and sister. Growing up a brown girl was who I believed I was, and I hated South Carolina for forcing me to think I was something else. It was synonymous. There's just no way in my 8-year-old mind that I could fathom being a German and a nigger. Or could I? Lena Scheffler had never called me that word. I couldn't wait to get back and tell her. We were blood sisters, just like Tonto and the Lone Ranger. We even merged our blood together in a pact after we accidentally fell down trying out our new skateboards on frozen snow. Maybe being a nigger wouldn't be so bad if Lena was a nigger too.